Welcome to the latest instalment of the CarpFix Live. Obviously, as always, the main purpose of these is to do an interactive Q&A with you, the member. But before a few people get logged in, we're going to start with a bit of a download of what we've been up to in the last few months. I can't actually remember when the last live was. Scott has just been saying that the last one we did was in March. Is that right?
Yeah, March was the last one, and I'm not too sure what we last spoke about. It's been a little while.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to say if I start talking about. I'm going to start with Fulleys Lake and then move on to the River Lot. But if we've talked about that before, please let us know in the comments, because that'd be interesting to know if we've missed one. But yeah, so back in April, myself and Ash went to Fulleys Lake in the Champagne region of France. It's not too far from Gigantica, and it's an up-and-coming lake that's sort of under the banner of Angling Lines. It's relatively cheap compared to a lot of holiday venues in France. Fished at over £70. I think it's roughly got 600 carp inside. Not loads of big ones, I'll be honest. There's not like herds and herds of 70s and stuff like that. It's like 170. I think there's several fish over 50, maybe the odd 60, but the bulk of the stock is sort of young, fast-growing fish. A lot of, well, what you'd say is a mixed bag. Quite a few scaly ones in there, which is quite unique for a French commercial venue. And it's run by a friend of mine called Constant Lebel. He's a French local who I met at Orient back in 2015. I've kept in touch with him ever since. Really good angler. It's a nice venue, not overly, not too many swims on it. Nice. Each swim has got a lot of water. I think it's got, might have 5 or 6 swims round it, and it's 27 acres. And again, one of the things that I like most about it is that you can pre-book your swim in advance. For me, when you go on holiday, it's a huge investment of not just like money, but of time. To know that you're going to be sitting somewhere, could be a week's annual leave for a lot of people, and you're going to be in the same swim. You're not going to have the option to move. Taking that element of the draw out of it for me is massive. If I'm going to pay my money and set aside time to go to these French commercial venues, to know that you're safe in the knowledge that you're going to be in a good swim, one that you've looked at on the map, one that's got good form for the time of year, etc. And we had swim 5 and 6 reserved. Derek Harrison came with me, and it was relatively early. Like I say, it was early April. He'd been fishing really slow in the run-up to us arriving, and then there was some pretty decent mild weather before we arrived. Lots of good sunshine, and I remember the day before we arrived, Constant, the guy that runs the lake, sent me some pictures that he'd taken with his drone over the lake, and you could just see like mushroom clouds of disturbed like clay mud all over the lake as the fish were feeding really, really hard. It looked like someone had dropped bombs on it. It was literally mushroom clouds of mud everywhere. And to see that before we got there was, a real good boost. At that time of year, it can be hit and miss, but sort of early April, I'd say you're pretty safe. You're definitely safe from spawning, barring like the random bit of snow that you can occasionally get or sort of hail at that sort of time of year. The odds are pretty good. We had some pretty hectic action. Didn't get into any of the real big fish, but I had a few 40s. Caught a lot of fish, bait boating out into small clear spots in the weed, and a nice social with Derek. A good couple of films that we got there. A week or so later after that shoot, myself and Ash headed really far down into France, like I can't remember how many hours it was, but we went to the River Lot via a company. A lot of carp, it's called, isn't it? It was a lot of carp. Yeah, you can find them on Instagram. A lot of carp. It's a boat rental company. They've got a few different styles of boats. Some more luxury than others. And the one we had was a Felicity boat, a 23-footer, slept 2 comfortably. It had a cooker in it, it had a fridge in it, a massive deck area. And obviously fishing from a boat like that is an experience in itself, and sort of quite a unique style of film for us to put out. Sort of certainly a million miles from your typical commercial venue in France that we've just been to, or your typical English commercial venue, like a day ticket, like Linear, or for example. So firstly, it's miles away from that. But secondly, we're fishing on the River Lot, which is, I would say it's definitely up there in the top handful of picturesque venues that I've ever fished in my life. You know, obviously it's sectioned via weirs and locks. The stock, I wouldn't say it's completely unknown, but largely unknown. Certainly not named fish and whatnot. With like big mountainous backdrops in the shot, and I've got very, very, very limited experience of fishing on rivers, so I'm sort of learning. You're trying to learn the section that you pick on the job. I can't remember how long we were there. We were there 10 days. Might have been like 8 or 9 days fishing, 10 days with the travel. And I caught my first barbel. Never caught any barbel before. Obviously, rivers like that are mixed fisheries. There's all sorts of fish. Caught barbel, caught chub, caught bream, caught catfish, and obviously caught some carp. And the film played out pretty well, as in we struggled in the first of the two parts, didn't really get into the bigger fish. It was a little bit colder than we'd perhaps hoped when we booked it. It was back end of April, the session, and we wanted to get there before spawning, but in good temperatures as well. And we definitely struggled a little bit at the beginning, and then we got into a real habit of pre-baiting, like really getting some. We had a lot of boilies with us, a lot of tiger nuts, and when you're not on a murky river like that, you know, you always hear me talk about location, looking for jumping fish, looking for fish on a wild river like that. Location, in the standard sense, in those conditions, was completely null and void. Never saw a single carp in the water. Don't remember seeing any jump out. So it was a real case of sort of driving up and down the river in the boat, looking at each particular area. And what I was really looking for was fallen trees. That was one of the main things we're looking for. A very natural environment, lots of fallen trees, all down like a 5 kilometre section, but looking for the real sort of concentrations of clumps of trees nearer to the ends of the section. You know, some people might say that if you set up in the middle of a section like that, you've got chance of traffic coming from both ways. But I prefer to fish on the canals and on rivers after this session, being closer to the end. You know, if you've got a 5 kilometre section, I'll be looking to fish within the top kilometre or kilometre and a half of each end of the section. And we got into a habit of like baiting up with, I would say, around 6 to 10 kilos of boilies and maybe half that in tiger nuts, and put that out onto a spot and leave it for 2 days, and then go and try it after the swim. Sometimes we bait the swim twice, you know, put 5 kilos out, 5 kilos of boilies, 5 kilos of tiger nuts, and then we'd go back a day later and top up the bait again, because we were catching so many nuisance fish. You know, there was a large opportunity or large possibility of lots of the bait being eaten by nuisance fish before the carp turned up. So yeah, we got into a habit of pre-baiting, trying to let the bait work for 2 days and then moving in on it. And I really felt towards the end of the section, we really, not end of the section, and towards the end of the session, we really got to grips with our section and we were catching consistently, and we finished with a 48-pound river carp, which is the biggest carp I've ever caught from a river, and got the take live on camera while I was doing a piece to camera in the daytime. Really good fight out in the flow. Fish fought well on little short rods, and those films, they're coming out back end of August, aren't they?
Yeah, it was going to be a little bit earlier in August. It's now going to be middle of September because we've got a busy August. I've basically moved stuff around a little bit, so
because it's a big edit.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. So it will be basically, I think it's like the middle of September. So it'll be the 8th. 8th of September. We're hoping it'll be the first one, depending on how the editing goes. But the Fullies film that you spoke about before, that's already out. So if no one's watched that, then that is available now on the feature films part on the app or on the website.
Yeah.
Got lots of questions coming in. One was about your new boat.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Shall we have a little talk about... We went to Gigantica. Should we have a little talk about that?
We do Gigantica. While Pecky's talking about Gigantica, don't forget to get your questions in. If you've got anything summer related, that would be quite useful.
Yeah, anything.
If you can get your questions in for Pecky, and then we'll do that after you've had a little
rant about that.
About Gigantica.
Yeah, so we went to Gigantica. I believe it was... so it's the 2nd or the 3rd week of May. I got there a day early. No, I didn't get there a day early. But I got there in the morning before normal arrival time. And I had a little sneaky trot round. Everyone had reeled in from the previous week's anglers. They'd all reeled in. I had a quick trot round. And when I got into the tree line swim, the water in that corner was completely coloured up, like noticeably. One little climbing, like you've got these little sort of, like almost like little pathways into the bushes that sort of open up on the tree line that you cast to. And there was just fish everywhere. Every single gap that I walked into, carp were swimming past, big ones, small ones, medium ones, like loads of them. And tree line's not a popular swim, hadn't been productive the week before. And I drew ball 7 and I got that swim and I was absolutely buzzing. But literally after getting the rods out, making a bit of a hash of it, if I'm honest. I cast out too many times, bombed it up a little bit too much. Woke up 24 hours later and all the fish were gone. The water was almost crystal clear and there were loads of fish jumping up the other end. So although I've drawn ball 7, I made the move after 24 hours, technically taking the last swim on the lake, the swim that nobody wanted, pole position. It's one that I fished before. And it was a tough week, like we filmed at Gigantica last year and we had 2 bites, caught 2 fish. One was a 54 and one was a 40, one was a 47. So 2 fish, 2 decent fish last year. And then this session, you're always hoping to go one better. But it was tough. I plumbed the swim, found a nice spot at 19 wraps, filled it in, probably a little bit heavier than in hindsight I should have done. And it took a couple of days to sort of spark up, but I had 2 bites in quick succession off that big initial bait up. One was an incredible fish called the baby weld, 51 or 52 pounds, and then a couple of days, I think the second from last day, had one called short dorsal at 42 pounds on a single solid bag. But it's always talking about carp fishing in hindsight is a wonderful thing. And although I caught a 51, 52 pounder and a 40, looking back, I certainly didn't make the most of the swim. For example, one of the biggest mistakes I made was I was fishing with a zig rig on my 3rd rod. And I chopped and changed the depth on it. I lost count of how many times I cast it to a different spot, how many times I took the depth down. And it was after like 5 days or something, I was reeling it in. And there was some weed on the hook as it was coming in. And it was a long zig, and I just paused for a second, and I saw the zig sinking. Right? And I was like, "It must be the weed. It must be the weed on my hook that's dragging the hook bait to the bottom." So, I was worried. I lifted it out, took the weed off, chucked it back in the edge, and it sunk. So for 5 days, I'd been casting around a piece of black foam on really long hook lengths.
Why were you moving it and changing the depth all the time?
Because I was seeing fish in different parts of the swim, so I was changing the position of it based on where the fish were showing, and they were at different times in the session. They were at different ranges, different areas, and I was
chasing them a bit.
You're chasing them, yeah, and chasing the conditions. If it was hot, I would come higher. If it was through the night, I would go lower. I've made so, but you're trying so many times and you're not getting any feedback.
It's frustrating.
You lose a bit of like your mojo. It's hard to keep doing something when you're not getting anything back.
Yeah.
And when I saw that sinking, I was mortified. I'm there filming, talking like I know what I'm talking about, and then to realise that you're fishing with a bit of sinking foam, and you've just wasted your whole session almost.
Like it was. Yeah, you could have caught them.
I might have done as well. Painful, but I love fishing at Gigantica. We're going again next year for the CarpFix social. Got 2 trips on there next year in August.
Almost back to back, aren't they?
Yeah, the week in the middle. But I think we can probably start with these questions now.
And that film's out, isn't it? Gigantica.
The Gigantica's
out.
out. Very real film. That Gigantica film is a very, very, like, a lot of times when you see like the smash up sessions on these commercial venues in France, it's the swim has been reserved. It hasn't been pre-baited. You see all the comments on social media saying the swim's been baited in advance, which is absolute rubbish.
Yeah.
But when you're not in the draw and you can have first pick, the odds are massively stacked in your favour. So to have that session where technically I've come out last and still, I wouldn't say make the most of the swim, because obviously I was fishing with sinking zig for days on end, but to come away with the biggest fish of the week and a 42 pounder to back it up, both nice fish. I think it's a very realistic film, something people can take a lot from.
Yeah, you said at the end of the film, in the little interview you did, that fishing at that time of year is never going to be easy. So
on a deep lake, like obviously Gigantica, I think on average it's 22 foot deep. I know that it does go up and down in places, but on average it's a 20 foot lake. It's 22 foot, that sort of depth. And in the spring, obviously it's warming from the surface. The fish for years gone by now, it's the corners with the shallower water tend to be the more productive areas. Gigantic has a reputation for being a long range lake, doesn't it? Like fishing to the middle, which can be true, especially towards the back end. Once you get into like October, around then they can quite often ball up in the middle around. There's some old tractor tyres and car tyres.
Huh? I heard they're coming out.
Yeah, that's what's being talked about. They're basically thinking that the fish only hold round these tyres. Because that's a feature. It's the only feature in the lake. And there's talk of them getting divers in and having them all pulled out.
Didn't they put a camera down? And Dan was like, right, they're coming out.
Yeah. I think it was Rusty. Oscar Thornton was in a swim called Alamo. And I think he's fishing pretty far out. He might have been fishing like 35 wraps or 36. I think there's a limit on it now. I think you're only supposed to be fishing at 30 wraps, which is 120 yards. And I think Oscar might have been fishing 35 reps or something like that, which is 140 yards. He'd done 4 or 5 nights, didn't catch anything, it was cold. I think it was November or December. Decided that it weren't going to happen, just bail out and go home. And then someone stuck a GoPro down at 40 reps and it'd been in the water 5 minutes and they're just monsters, just all swimming past it, and swimming not just in winter mode, really moving about. Happy. But that can show you that, especially on a small lake. On a big lake, if you're within 20 yards of them, you're probably going to catch them.
Yeah.
But on a lake like that, sometimes he was 20 yards short of where they were, say 20, 30, 40. I think it's 40 yards short of where they were or something.
Yeah.
But even 4 feet on certain spots and in certain situations can be the difference between catching and blanking, especially when it's on a slope, on a deep. I know it's not in this situation, but they're on the edge of this ball of tyres that are out there, there's nest of tyres. And you imagine every day people casting, spomming. They know pushing, and there's it's like a donut. There's this little centre area in the middle of the lake where the fish frequent. You only got to look at the catch reports to see in the colder months there that it can be quite peggy. So by taking the tyres out, I think they're hoping that you're going to get a more even.
It's a hidden feature,
when we were there, it was a real even playing ground. Although the edge swim's done the best, I think everyone who was on the week we were there caught.
Yeah.
And when you say there's 12 anglers on, and I only managed 2, I think there was a lot of people that managed 1 or 2. And with I think Scotty's done 15 to 20 bites, and I think the guy next to me, Rick, I'm pretty sure he had 15 to 20 bites next to me. He was just absolutely mowing it down. I'm sitting there drinking beer, just pulling my hair out, thinking, I can't change anything, I can't move.
Fishing with sinking foam.
Fishing with sinking foam, drinking too much beer.
It's not going
well. But yeah.
Oh dear.
Should we have some of these questions?
I'll try and just dig out this. Here it is. So Toby Bowen has asked, it's about Gigantica, about September on the main lake. Have you any good tips for this time of year?
September?
September to Gigantica. It's his first trip to France as well, so he's very excited.
Yeah.
How would you approach Gigantica in September?
Again, obviously you're going to be in the draw, so that's that you're going to have to be thinking of different styles of fishing that you could be faced with. I would say there's half the swims, maybe less. It can be helpful to fish up to 120 yards out, like 30 wraps. That 30, I think the limit on a lot of swims is like 30, 31 wraps. So you need to have that in your locker. So if you can't, then maybe perhaps do a bit of practice. Certainly be taking tapered line, because you're not allowed to use shock leaders on there. And tapered line, obviously, you've got the thick section on the end that takes the brunt of a heavy lead, like a 4.5 ounce lead, etc. But then it tapers down quickly onto a nice thin mono, which is the key. The key to long range fishing is the diameter of the line. The thinner the diameter, the further you'll cast. And I think the rule is on Gigantica that you can use down to 0.33, which is the 15-pound tapered long chuck from Corda. So I definitely have some spare spools with that on. You definitely want to be able to fish at 30, 31 wraps, spom and bait accurately. So you might need to put fresh braid on your spod rod, etc. So that's have that in your locker. Secondly, you'd think it'd be all about piling in the bait, and there's a lot of fish in Gigantica now. Maybe, I think there's 1,000 carp in Gigantica at this moment, something around that number, 900 to 1,100 carp, something like that in there. But what you got to think is there's a lot of bait going in there. And the two things that I've taken from my last two sessions is, obviously there's been a guy in the swim the week before you and he's been baiting up, and if he hasn't caught a lot of fish, if he's caught loads of fish, that's great, but if he hasn't caught a load of fish, there's a good chance that some of that bait, if not all of it, could be on the bottom. So I would be definitely inclined to not put much bait out if I was following someone in that hadn't done well. And I'd certainly be looking for my own spots. I'm really not into just jumping onto a spot. Like people say sometimes, this is the spot in this swim. And if the guy of the week before caught a load of fish on it, crack on. That's brilliant information, red hot, up-to-date info. But when I get told about a spot, if someone says there's a spot in a swim, and I say, when was the last time it done a bite? If they can't say it's done a bite within the last couple of weeks, then it's irrelevant. That's old news, and there's a good chance it's probably got a load of bait set on top of it. So doing a little bit of plumbing at the beginning of your week, go intense, do thrash your swim to within an inch of its life. If it's not got any fishing, if there's fish in your swim, then you can be a bit subtle about it. But if there isn't fish about when you start, definitely thrash it to within an inch of its life on day one. Know what's in front of you, where the clear spots are, etc., so that you can move your rods around depending when you see fish in your swim, etc. And another thing that would be worth having in your locker is solid bag techers. Solid bags doing a lot of bites on Gigantica of late. Of recent years, and because of the depth of the water and the speed that the bags sink, it'd be well worth either double bagging or using the extra thick PVA, the slow melt one.
I did a tank shot for some of the Corda promo stuff that we do, and put it in the tank, and it's crazy how longer
it takes.
Yeah, I did the normal one, and then I did the slow melt. It was just
different.
And I felt like the presentation was different because it was slower. It was better.
Better with a slow melt.
Yeah. Because it was releasing more slowly rather than
Did they give you those bags ready tied? Or did you make them yourself?
Rob made them.
Yeah. I was going to say they look proper neat. I was going to say I'm impressed.
Rob sent them to me.
Right, yeah. But yeah, that's my advice for Gigantica. Like the three tips would be: don't fill it in with bait if the guy before you hasn't done well. And he's put a lot of bait out. Look for your own spots, especially if the spots that they're recommending haven't done bites recently. Be geared up to fish at 30 to 31 wraps if need be, and to have some solid bag techers with you. They're the top tips I would give for fishing there in September.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Timothy Robinson, he was the first one with a question tonight. And it is, what is the top 3 things you see carp anglers doing wrong whilst you're on the bank fishing?
The number one would be just going into a swim because it's free or they can fish next to their mate, or because it's done fish recently. So they're not actually actively trying to locate fish. So that would be number one. They'd be going on old news. Like they heard a swim done bites 2 weeks ago, and then they jump in there. But what they don't know is because it done bites 2 weeks ago, everyone knows that swim's been fished every day since and probably done nothing. So if you're going on info, make sure it's very much up to date, because it's very easy to be chasing bites that happened 2 weeks ago and just setting up in a swim that hasn't done them for 2 weeks. So actively looking for fish, not just going in the free peg because it's next to your mate, etc. So that would be number one. Number two would be not paying attention to the sharpness of your hook. Even some of the most experienced, regarded as the best anglers I know, I watched them, the way they handle their rig, the way they have no sort of sense of how important that point is. The hook point is the connection between you and the carp. That's the bit that gets you the bite. Obviously, you've got the bait that draws the fish to take it. You've got the mechanics of the rig, etc., all of that. But the bit that initiates the bite is the hook point. It's all about that moment of contact and whether it catches or it doesn't catch. And I think that I would think that there's a huge amount of people out there fishing with hooks that are probably bird. They've probably caught them on the inside of their bivvy, on their bed chair, on their hand, on their clothing, on anything, dragged them across the bottom. And I'm not saying some hooks can survive that sort of manhandling, and a blunt hook to start with will be less prone to burring. But if you're using sharp hooks, I can't get across how important it is to make sure that hook point does not come into contact with anything before the lead touches the bottom. I'm super fussy with that, and I really try and make not anything touch the hook point. I never drag it along the bottom, and I always change my hook after every cast. Now, you think that I would be saying that to sell you tackle because I work for Corda as well, but honestly, if I had to buy my hooks, I would be exactly the same, because I honestly believe that is an absolute massive thing that you can do to give yourself an advantage over the guy in the next peg. And the third thing I would say is people not plumbing themselves and just get fishing on spots that people tell them. It's a very lazy thing to do. Someone to say there's a spot out there at 19 wraps, you just go in there, cast at 19 wraps, and if it's a good spot, you might catch. But spots blow when they get overfished. They get too much bait on them. They quickly get too big. Fish get spooked off by them. So one of the greatest tips I would have is to find your own spots. So number one, look for fish. Try and set up in a swim that you found fish in. Two, really look after your hook points. Make sure as they can be as sharp as they possibly can, and that they've not been dragged about before they end up in position. And number three, make sure you know what you're fishing over. Don't just take people's words for it, because people hold the rods at different angles. People have different lengths on their cords. Try and find your own spots. They'd be my top three biggest things.
Cool. Mick the Greek, would you be happy to use the multi-rig on a naked heli as lead as a band on his lake? Also, what kind of lake bottom would you be happy to fish the rig over?
Right, okay, so we'll do it in reverse order. So if you're going to fish it on a lead clip like I do in a lot of the films, I'm happy sometimes if the lead plugs. So do you know what people say? They go gravel or silt. To be honest, that's a really bad breakdown of spots. You've got gravel, then you've got mud. And obviously, you've got different types of mud. You've got harder mud, which is clay, and you've got softer mud. And most lakes, especially the commercial ones, are more gravel and mud rather than gravel and silt. And if the lead is plugging, I'm not too worried about that. You can generally tell if the bottom is too soft for a lead clip presentation with a combi multi-rig. Quite often, if the lead's plugged too far, you will see there'll be a bit of a kink or a bit of a wave in your hook link when you retrieve it. It's where the lead's plugged in the bottom and the hook link's been propped out of the bottom and sort of bent over. So for me, the lead can plug or stick, but you don't want it completely buried. So you're looking for a firm drop, but it doesn't have to be rock hard. So from firm mud, hard mud, onto gravel, but not for soft mud or weed. So that's what I would say regarding the combi multi-rig on a lead clip. Now, I have used the combi multi-rig on helicopter to great success at Wellington Country Park, but I was tying it different back then. I was tying it out of coated braid. I was using the semi-stiff end trap from Corda, fishing on the helicopter rig, and never had any bother with tangles whatsoever. Caught loads of fish. I was fishing it on gravel, to be fair, even on a helicopter rig. But then a little while later, we went to Layer, and we fished with a combi multi-rig, normal style, so with the boom and the braided section. I can't remember if it was on lead core or naked, but I received several tangles in a single day. I don't know why that was exactly, but I definitely had a few tangles fishing with the combi multi-rig. I think it was on lead core. I think it was. Few tangles, but I would just... You soon know, if you cast that out there on a naked setup and you don't get any tangles, like you have like 20 chucks of it, don't get any tangles, chances are you're not, but you want to test it. You want to go to your lake, throw it out there 20 times, various impacts on the clip, etc., and just test it, see if it's coming back tangled. Because everyone's got their own little take on rigs, and they're like, you're going to tie a combi multi-rig up, put it up on a naked setup, but I don't know exactly how you're going to set that up. And every little slight adjustment you make, from bead position to the types of bead that you've got it on, to the hook bait size, all of those things are going to have a bearing on whether it might tangle or not. So my advice would be, if you're going to fish combi multi-rig on a helicopter setup, I would test it with whatever hook bait you plan to use a few times, 20 casts. If you don't get any tangles in 20 casts, I'd say you're pretty good to go. So that was what I'd say. There is a section on, or not, it's not about this directly, but when Scott and I fished on Twas Hills in November, using the combi multi-rig as normal throughout the session, and then I found this spot that was smooth, but it was soft. Every time I cast out there with the marker float and like felt it down, I'd drag back, it feels smooth. I'd put it in the clip, I'd cast it out, feel it down, it feels soft, and the float wouldn't come up. And because the float wouldn't come up, I was pretty certain that the lead and the float were in the bottom together, and that was why the float couldn't get the traction to start coming up. And because of that, I changed from a combi multi-rig to a stiff hinge on a helicopter rig and caught that spot. I'd have never fished that spot normally. It was only the fact that we were seeing fish in that vicinity. One of my rods wasn't doing anything. I decided to make the change, put that stiff hinge out there, and because that bead's further up the line, I knew it's presented, and it ended up being, I only fished it the last couple of nights, but it was the most productive rod of those last couple of nights. So yeah, if you do start getting some tangles on the combi multi-rig fishing with a heli, I would say perhaps try stiff hinge. And you can fish stiff hinges on the bottom. The guy, that Rick, who was fishing next to me at Gigantica, he was fishing a stiff hinge rig with double balanced corn. So the whole rig's lying down on the bottom, and he absolutely smashed it to death next to me. So although it's not something a lot of people do, stiff hinge on the bottom, I would, having seen that Rick next to me catching really well, I would not ignore that for a slow sinking bait on top of silt.
Cool. Talking of the combi rig, Matt was in France and he had a new PB, £47.
Yep, good to hear. Ago. Good to hear.
Nice. Wes, currently sat on a weedy lake, normally gin clear, but suffering with a bad algae bloom. Any tips, tricks, experiences?
Yeah, I've definitely got experiences of that. Bayswater is a classic example of that. We've never filmed there during these sessions, so I haven't got a film about it to refer back to, but I can certainly refer back to some sessions that I've had there. One of the noticeable things at Bays, when the algae bloom happened, the algae bloom would immediately kill the weed. And now when the weed was dying, suddenly the natural food that was once hidden suddenly becomes really available to the fish. And the fish seemed super active during these algae blooms, really jumping out, loads of fizzing up going on, and bites on standard tactics be very hard. So September, brilliant time of year, loads of active fish jumping around, couldn't catch anything. Cottoned on to why fish were eating the naturals, and a little egg-sized maggot bag with a Magaliner rig was, absolutely devastating on there. So if you're fishing a lake that's having an algae bloom, hasn't got too many nuisance fish, if there's loads of bream, tench, roach, I appreciate that the maggot bag isn't that effective if you're catching too many nuisance fish. But if it isn't overpopulated with nuisance species, I would definitely recommend that. That was an absolute game changer at Bay. So yeah, if there isn't too many nuisance fish, give the maggot liner with an egg-sized PVA mesh bag of just straight maggots. And if it is real sort of, if it is populated with loads of nuisance fish, you're going to be looking. What I found as well, when those weed areas die, they quite often turn the bottom in these algae blooms can turn the bottom pretty rank, as in like they go like the bottom starts to smell really bad. And I've never found really smelly bottom, in my opinion. That sounds a bit weird. Really smelly bottom to be
Ash will be clipping that one.
Yeah, I've never found really smelly lake bed to be productive. I'm not saying you can't catch out of it, but I can't think of a single situation in God knows how many years of carp fishing where really smelly lake bed is the best thing to do. So targeting the shallower water during these algae blooms on exposed areas of clean hard bottom can be better than fishing in the deeper water when the lake bed turns bad.
Cool. Joey wants to know about your new boat.
Yeah.
So you used to have a boat called the Black Pearl.
Yeah.
You ditched it.
So what happened is I turned up to Gigantica in June, and the boat hadn't been used since the previous summer. Now, I'm a proper blame shifter in the. I like to throw blame when I suddenly find something's wrong. I can't help it. I don't even do it on purpose. It just happens. I was like, who's done that? And when I arrived at Gigantica, the drainage plug to the boat was in, and the boat was level filled with water. So it had about 1.25 meters of water, and it was full of rancid pond water, broke leaves and stuff in. And where it had been full of water, all the paint had taken on the moisture and all started peeling.
It's almost like it had been sunk.
Yeah, it was like it'd been sunk.
Yeah.
It was honestly, you see that everyone sees that picture that I've posted in my book and on social media of it looking freshly painted in 2019. It was mint in 2019, but what you got to remember is it sat at Gigantica through all of COVID, and then this time, so it was probably me. Last summer, I left Gigantica having caught that 70-pounder, and I was absolutely buzzing. Got straight on the beers with the lads at Gigantica and anyone else who would get involved with it. And there's a very good chance that I left the plug in. But at the time, I was like, who's done this? Who's done this? And anyway, I fished on it for a week with Christopher Pashmans. He wasn't in it, but he was like with me. And it was rancid. And having done that week on the River Lot, fishing from that really big 23-foot boat, I knew that company did a smaller version. I got in touch with them and bought. What was the question anyway? What was the question about the boat? Just asking about it.
He was just asking about your new boat. How is it? Looks like a good bit of kit.
Literally, it is absolutely awesome. It is. I was with Derek. We had a little session on it together. I had a gas fridge on board. Very easy to take too much kit on a boat like that and be very cramped and uncomfortable. And you can fish 2 men on it. You can. We did. But you need to know each other pretty well. It's very compact, very tight. For one angler, it is pure luxury. It's really, really nice. Really, really nice bit of kit.
And where are they from? The make?
They're from Holland. They're from the northern part of Holland called Friesland. They sell more of the bigger boat, the 23-footers that we use in that film on.
With the fridge and the toilet.
Yeah, they sell loads more of them because
if you're going to buy a boat, that's what you get.
Yeah,
you do it proper, don't you?
They come with hot. You can have them with hot water, so for showers, like shower. You can have them with a cooker. You can have them with a toilet. You can have them with 2 beds. You can have solar panels. Literally, you can have hydraulic screws that go down into the lake bed to hold you in place. You can go absolutely wild with it, But then it's not only that, you've got to have the trailer for it. Yeah. You've got to have the
car to pull it.
You've got to have the car to pull it. You've got to have the engine to drive them around. So it's for the amount of time that I get, I think mine's 5 meters.
You were due a new one.
Yeah.
Okay, Jack Mycroft, how would you tackle a deep pit at this time of year? Margins are very steep and weedy, and zigs haven't produced so far. So a deep pit at this time of year, what would you do?
Well, we're in the back end of July at the moment, and I would say the fish do start definitely from September. We'll usually start exploring the deeper parts of the lake. That is all dependent on how deep we're talking. I don't know how deep this lake is. But yeah, I would, at this moment in time, I would still be focusing around the weed, the features where the fish in the shallower water are likely to be. So locations, everything. I'd be looking for fish jumping. I'd be looking for fish cruising through the weed beds in the day, etc. I'd be looking for fish under trees, all of that. But yeah, for now, I'd be concentrating in the shallower water still around the obvious features where I'm seeing the fish. But definitely with one eye on as we go August, September, definitely October, fish progressively getting caught deeper. So it's well worth plumbing slightly deeper than where you're fishing at the moment and having an eye on spots that are going to come into play just in a few weeks' time.
Cool. Adam has asked, he's got a set of 12-foot, 3 3.25 test curve Bezier rods and struggle to hit anything over 22 wraps. So how far should I be casting on average?
I would say that you should be able to reach 30 wraps with that setup. I wouldn't say it's ideal for it, but I would say you should be able to reach at least 28, 28 wraps with that setup. But what it is, like I've mentioned a little bit earlier in this podcast, is that the line diameter is going to be the single thing that you can do to improve your range. If you're telling me that you're casting 22 wraps and you're using 15-pound fluorocarbon, for example, or 20-pound mono, if you change to a tapered line with a diameter of 0.30, you do the same cast that you cast in 22 wraps and you're going to smash the clip at 30 wraps. So the first thing that you can do is use a tapered line with a lower diameter main line, so like down to a 0.30, maybe a 3.3. That's going to be the first thing that's going to give you much more range immediately. And obviously, there's loads of videos on YouTube of Terry Edmonds casting. We've got the Corda Long Range Masterclass from last year. And practice as well. Practice not in a session. Maybe like when you haven't got time to do a full session, it's worth. I used to do it as a youngster. I used to go to the field and I used to go to other lakes in the winter and practice, because doing like 50 big chucks in a row, you really start to get a feel for it. And when you're fishing, you get a bit of, you try not to bomb your swim up, etc. So, and you're more confident when there's no one around you watching. You've just got a bare lead on. You're not going to crack a rig off. And if you do crack a bare lead off, you can just go again. So, yeah, practice is obviously one of the massive things. But line diameter, you should be able to hit 28 to 30 wraps with those rods in decent conditions.
Cool. Oh, no, done that one. Craig Ball has asked, what is the best value for money bait boat to use? Obviously, there's loads on the market.
I'm really not up to date with what costs what.
Yeah.
I've had a Carp Lounge RT4, a really nice boat. The things that I like best about that was it turned very well on a sixpence. Because it's got jet engines rather than propeller. It was very easy to turn it on a spot, and they're literally going for a lot, because the Carp Lounge have just brought out the RT7. Which is a new top of the range all singing. It's basically destroyed the second hand market of the RT4, and there's loads of them available out there. And the RT4 is still a brilliant bait boat. Probably you can get them for much cheaper than you ever could before. They turn really good, and they've got all sorts of wild tech on them, from autopilot, so you can pin spots and it can drive out there in the dark and come back. You can have the lights off, you can send it to a pin, get it to come back, and no lights on, like a real good boat with good echo sound on it. Personally, I've got a Navigator at the moment, which is the main reason for switching to the Navigator was how quiet it is. It's on a different level of subtleness. If you're fishing in shallow water, much quieter, much stealthier. And when I was fishing at Bayswater and I had that massive smash up when I caught pin scale at 52 pounds, I was sending it out onto a clip, onto a horizon marker, and once that spot started to produce fish, I could see the fish on the echo sounder literally come on the clip. It'd arrive on the spot, and because the echo sound is showing me what's on the bottom beneath the boat, you could see fish feeding on the spot, and they was fishing in 9 foot of water and just dropping rigs on their heads and getting take after take, which is something that I never experienced when using the RT4. Caught loads of fish using the RT4, but that Navigator is definitely stealthy. I think Ridge Monkey do a boat now that's cheap.
Yeah, it's quite
cheap.
Small
It's
one.
like, and I think it's like
probably a few £100.
I think it's like 6. I think 6.
But like you say, them RT4s, they were clearing them at half price. So I imagine.
So the second-hand price is even less.
Yeah. So like, if you can get one of those second-hand, that's what.
Facebook Marketplace is a great place to look for those bait boats. They just pop up like from time to time. In my garage, I had a really old wave runner that I let Ted use as a toy, my youngest boy. But he broke the handset on it this morning. He picked it up and dropped it on the concrete and just blew the handset up. Yeah.
Oh well. Yeah, we don't really have a clear answer, but definitely an RT4 would.
RT4 is a great boat and cheap,
yeah.
but I still think those Ridge Monkey ones will be cheaper. I think if they retail at 6, I can imagine you can pick a second-hand one up for 400.
Yeah.
That sort of, and 400 quid isn't that bad.
No, I think at the end of the day, it depends if you want like the echo sounder, all of that, because that obviously adds cost to it. So if you don't need that, if you just, I
think the echo sounder is a. I wouldn't say it's absolutely essential. If you're going to plumb and just send it out there, but if you want to use it to fish further than you can cast, then you don't know what the bottom's like, do you? And if you'd be dropping blind, which on a lake with no weed isn't a problem. But the echo sounder is almost as important as the boat if you're going to be dropping beyond casting range.
Yeah. Okay.
Tom
has asked, do you have any tips for preventing wind knots when using zigs? I feather my casts, but still seem to get them. Many thanks.
Is he talking about wind knots on the main line or on the rig?
Because
wind knots are generally referred to as the main line. And there's no, like using a zig rig to using a normal zig rig, there's no difference.
I can only assume it's on the zig.
Yeah, so let's assume it is on the hook link, and that'll be all to do with your lead setup. How you arrange your lead clip or inline lead, tail rubber, anti-tangle tubing, etc., and anti-tangle sleeve at the front. Now, obviously, you're a CarpFix member. You're here asking questions. We've definitely got there's bits on there from me at Burners using zig rigs, and I think we've done a Peckers Teckers on it as well.
Yeah, and Burgess
did it as well.
Hardwick Smiths.
Yeah, I would just watch those, either the Peckers Teckers video, or either the Burners film, the first one, or this Rob Burgess one at Hardwick. There's videos of us using zig rigs in there, and that's the most important thing: getting your lead system neat and tidy as shown. And I do like to trap my cast before it impacts the water, but right at the last second. I like it when I'm freestyling, not to a clip, like a cast. I'm watching the lead. I give it a little couple of feathers just before it gets there, and just as it's dropping out the sky, I like to trap the line, trying to throw that zig out there. In an ideal world, you see the old double plop, bang bang. You see the lead land and you see a little plip next to it. That's absolutely ideal. But I also appreciate that that's not possible in every situation. There's lots of times I'll cast out my zigs and I don't see the second splash. But you need to know that it's not tangled. And again, like I mentioned when talking about the combi multi-rig, I would say you need to be doing 20 casts in a row without getting a tangle to know that that is set up correctly. If you're getting more than one tangle in 20 casts, something is not right, or you're not doing it quite right.
Cool. I think the video is spring fishing at Linear Fisheries. I'm sure you'll be able to see Rob's setup there anyway, and then the other films obviously that you mentioned. You'll see it on there. Right, let's have a look. Twas So David is going to Twas next week in Peg 14,
which is
it's round.
I know where that is. Yeah,
top side.
Towards where you caught that 60-pounder.
10, 11, 12. 40, ish.
It's like one back from the big one that fishes between the islands, isn't it? It's one back from that.
One back,
It's in that. Yeah, I've not fished that swim. I know on the Corda film when they do the social there.
Yeah.
Because I've watched a couple of those films in preparation of us going there.
Yeah.
And a guy was fishing out of that 14 at 28 wraps. and caught some fish. I think it was Marco.
Marco, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Marco.
Yeah.
On one of the Corda sail social films that they've done there. But yeah, I think that 14's a good swim because it's right in the zone of where you'd fish out of 10 long out of there. So yeah, I think that swim, in my opinion, that swim, I've not fished it, but I would say that swim is best fished at range. Trying to intercept fish that come round the corner of the island from swim 15, and
it's a long way that.
You're not hitting the island, but fishing it. I'm not saying you've got to fish the island, but I'm saying like fishing out there long, like 28, 30 wraps, that sort of job, trying to intercept fish as they come round.
Yeah. I do know as well, people that fish 15, fishing down to the right, and this is quite recently, down to the right, not too close in on the margins, have caught as well. So don't ignore the left-hand side up towards 15 from 14.
Short.
Yeah, short and just up. And there was also a sunken tree. I don't think Olivier's even got it out yet because it was the one that he couldn't find. Saw it on the drone. I think that might still be there.
Is that 13 or 14?
13. 13. It's to the it won't be far off 14. I think it's between the two.
I think 14's a decent swim.
It is,
I think it's a decent swim. It's very much sandwiched between 10 and 15, and 10 and 15 are regarded as two of the best on the lake. Yeah. So I would say that is a reasonable, definitely not a corner peg, but it's a good swim for traffic. I think there's a good chance of them. I think a lot of time they swim on that lake, they look dead in the daytime, and then the fish just move out, like just sort of under the cover of darkness. They just start coming out, and not even jumping. Just they creep out from between those islands and just on the hunt for food.
Yeah, 14's good swim.
Yeah,
you should get a few.
Good luck.
Terry Miller. Is it best to fish rod tips up or down with tips in the water, and what are the benefits of either?
It's all to do. Well, a lot of people would say it's down to just how it looks, but there's lots of practical reasons why you would fish in a different manner. So, for example, if you've got bits of drifting weed around that you can often get in the autumn, we're in summer now, but we're moving into the autumn, and as the weed beds die, bits of them break off and start floating around. If you've got your rods up, a little bit of weed gathers on your line, and another bit gathers, and it gets all out of control. Before you know it, you've got a big ball of weed on there, and it's pulling you off your spot. So in that situation, you would try and just have your tips just dipped a little bit, just to sort of keep your main line away from drifting weed. It doesn't matter if weed gets caught on your rods as they meet the water, but your main line is protected from that, and you shouldn't be pulled out of position. A reason to have your rod tips high would be to try and get over some marginal weed, or if you're fishing over something sharp, you're thinking like there's gravel bars out there and you want your line to pick up as high in the water as possible. Generally, I would say try not to have your rods too high. I know it can look quite cool, but I tell you what can happen a lot is you get moorhens just come around the front of your swim. I don't mean like coots, I mean those little moorhens with red beaks, and they're very nervous, shy birds. And the amount of times that at dawn they're just creeping around the edge, and they get to the front of the swim where you can see them, and they panic at the last moment and inevitably just pile straight into your lines and wipe you off your spot. So, yeah, I think it can look quite good having your rod tips up. I think you can use it to fish over weed and stuff. Keep your line above any marginal snags or gravel bars or whatever else. But I always think with rod tips up, you're asking for trouble. With stuff flying by. When I'm fishing on the boat at Orient, for example, I've always got the rod tips up because it's easier to come under your rods in the smaller inflatable. But for the most part, when I'm fishing at home in the UK, I've generally got my rod tips slightly submerged or just a few inches off the water.
Cool. Brandon has asked, what's the best way of spot finding in heavy weed, and what should I look for in the summer?
Well, obviously, there's all different manners of different types of weed. So it's very hard to give you an exact answer for plumbing in the weed. One thing that I would say that is a terrible thing to do is to start with any form of lead that's got prongs on it, any form of marker setup that's got a big tail. They have that sort of link between the lead and then the ring and then the float. If you plumb with all of that on to start with, inevitably, as it goes in the weed gathers round it, And then when you try and pull to find your spot, all you end up doing is pulling a massive clump of weed along the bottom. And I see like 9 out of 10 guys walk into the local tackle shop when they're going to get their buy their first marker set up. They buy one of these ready-made marker kits that's got all the contraption on there, and it's just an absolute disaster to find a clear spot with. So my recommendation would be to start with a bare lead that's smooth, not one of these rough textured sandy leads or anything like that. Ideally a tournament shaped lead, so smooth pointy lead that's easy to pluck through the weed. Because when I'm plumbing in weed, I cast into the weed and I tighten to the lead and I try and move the lead. If it resists, I just give it a tiny little flick, and what I'm trying to do is just hop it out of that little bit of weed and move on to the next bit. Because once you have weed connected to your lead, you can't feel anything. All you can feel is you towing that weed along the bottom, and you could be towing that weed across spots that you might want to feel or you might want to fish. So yeah, use a bare, smooth lead to start with. Use the sort of hopping technique to sort of just pluck it through the weed as you go, and you're looking for the clear bits, the gravel patches, etc., etc. And once you find something smooth, something hard, something that doesn't feel too bad, stick it in the clip. At that point, with not pointing at the spot because you'll be short, but pointing at sort of 11 o'clock like that. Cast it out on the same line. Try and feel it down, and you might have to adjust that clip a couple of feet either way, always trying to keep the rod in the same position. But generally, sometimes I do fish in the weed on blanket weed, but generally I'm looking for clear spots around the thickest parts of the weed. And you can, at that point, once you've found a clear spot, you can then change over to one of those pronged leads that a lot of companies do, and you can put the marker float on to see exactly how deep it is. But when you're initially looking for your spot, start with a smooth lead that doesn't catch up in the weed too easily.
Cool. Dean has asked, after catching mostly big fish in England, will you ever take your fishing more abroad, searching for the unknown?
Well, you could say I've been doing that for the last decade. Like obviously my last book that I wrote, most of my campaign style fishing in England sort of, I wouldn't say it completely ended in 2014, but I'd definitely become, after fishing in Belgium on the big lake we filmed for Corda's second masterclass film on that big public lake, a big lake called Hombeek. After fishing there, I had my eyes opened to the fact that there's non-commercial venues abroad that have got more big fishing that are under less angling pressure than we have in the UK. So yeah, I had my eyes open to the fact that I didn't have to compete with as many anglers and to be at the same time fishing for bigger fish. So I try and keep it. What was the question exactly? Like, will I ever?
So, will you take your fishing
into
more
Europe?
Abroad? Yeah.
Well, yeah, you could say I have.
Now you've got your boat.
Yeah, like the thing is, you can't fish. Now fishing's technically what I do for a living. It's not like I go to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I'm spending weeks at a time, filming for Corda, filming for CarpFix, on commercial lakes, on public. I'm spending many weeks abroad each year, many weeks, and I'm going to Orient for anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks, not necessarily all in one go, but each year. So I'm spending weeks and weeks and weeks away from home, and I'm a father of 3, married, etc. So, I've got to really try not to do any more than I am already doing abroad. So yeah, I'm always on the lookout for a really nice ticket in the UK, so that when the Wazing ticket come up, for example, Welland and Welly ticket came up, for example, it has to be the right water though. I've had tickets in the UK in recent years, like Bayswater, where I'm happy to fish there early in the year, happy to fish there in the winter as such. But I always find on those smaller sort of syndicates that when it's the prime time, I don't want to be fishing on small ponds. I want to be fishing on big, vast venues where there is a chance of the unknown as well. So yeah, I think I can't fish any more in Europe than I already do. I'd say I'd be in trouble.
You're a busy man.
Yeah.
Right, Ian has asked, thinking about updating my rods I've had since 2015, I notice there's a trend now towards super powerful casting rods of 3 3/4 test curve. Can you recommend for smaller waters like the CAA waters, which is the
Chelmsford Angling waters.
Is it Chelmsford Angling? Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, it's not just about like super powerful. It's more about the feel and also to be able to pull them out of the weed, etc. Like I've at the moment got the 12-foot 4-pound Kaizens, which you can use for all general manner of fishing, but they are on the heavy side, like he's saying. They are on the heavy side as you'd expect as a 4-pounder. But the 3.5 is a really, really, really lovely rod. Now, I like stiffer rods because I find them easier to work with. I certainly wouldn't be going less. I think they do. They do a 3-pounder, so it's a 3, a 3.5, and a 4. I wouldn't be going any softer than a 3. I just can't. I don't think it gives you any advantage. It's only negative. You know, you can't use bigger leads easily. You can't pull them out the weed beds as easily. They don't recover as quick. So yeah, personally, you could get away with a 3-pounder on probably most of those Chelmsford Angling lakes, but I know there's, like you're saying, it's a trend, but there's a reason why it's a trend. You know, they cover all bases. You can use a stiff rod to fish in close if it isn't too stiff. You know, so I would say like a 3.25, 3.5 is probably where you want to be. I certainly wouldn't. I've obviously got access to all of it from Corder, etc. And I can't think for myself why I would use a 3-pounder. I literally can't think of any reason.
Yeah, cool. Right, let's have a look here. Stuart is off to Berners Hall in the morning, and he would like to know what would be your approach with the type of bait and baiting approach to the lake at this time of year.
Yeah, I've never fished Berners at this time of year, but I think it'd be on over there. You know, I've seen the catch reports. It's certainly been doing some fish. Spawning's out the way. I imagine the fish are using all the depths, as in they're not necessarily like in the spring. We caught a lot of fish on zigs there, and I know the shallower water produces well. But I would say there's a lot of fish in there. They're probably still relatively spawned out from the summer. They're hungry. I'll be looking for a clear spot. Again, it's a busy lake, sees a lot of lead being chucked out. I'd pick. You can break Berners down into almost like 3 areas. You've got the main bowl that you come up to, and the fish are often around the centre of that. So the centre of that first main bowl. And then there's also when you're fishing on the back of the island, so that's another area. And then you've got the third area, which is beyond the island, and again they can be in the middle of that. But for me, the 2 areas either side of the island, I treat them almost like separate lakes and try and work out whether the fish are in the middle of the main bowl that you arrive to or they're in the middle of the main bowl beyond the island. Generally, they're in the first end a lot of the time. And I would aim to fish in one of the central pegs that face those open areas at decent range, you know, 28, 30 wraps, whatever is the limit. Find a nice clear spot. And I would put some bait out. Like this time they'd be hungry. I don't know what's banned and what's not allowed on there. If you allow tigers, I'd be using tigers. If you're not, then I'd be... Yeah, this time of year, hot water, I like quite an oily mix sometimes, like trout pellets, hemp, boily crumb, that sort of thing. But a decent amount of bait out into the central body of the lake. I don't think you go far wrong. You're definitely going to get traffic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
so
fish in there.
Yeah. Good luck. Tom has asked, could you talk about self-takes at night on a DSLR tripod? What settings are you using and what flash?
I don't do that many self-take 90s, to be honest. I have done, but the thing is, I'm not good enough to really be giving advice. Like what I get night shot wise isn't that great. But what I would say is the setting on your camera for the flash, the one that's got that like lightning thing, I find that too hot. All the night shots that I've ever taken on that flash setting always come out very yellow. So I would manually set the white balance, and I'll test it until it looks real. That's what I've been doing in recent times. And I generally shoot at f4 you want a tight background. So wherever you can, try and get the fish and yourself and the mat very close to something to have. Sorry, I'm talking too much. I'm getting a dry throat. Yeah, I'll get really close to the background so that you can get a bit of light bouncing off that. And previously, I've always shot with like a shutter speed around 250. But I did see something by a Dutch angler talking about having a slower shutter speed so it captures more. So I probably would go a bit shorter than that, around 60 to 100th of a second, like in that sort of...
Some of those flashes, I'm not a pro by any means at the photography side, but I'm sure like the flash that we use, it doesn't work properly if it's below 200.
What, too fast? You mean it's faster than that, you mean?
Yeah.
Or slower than that?
No, if it's slower.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean, unless you shoot it on manual.
Yeah, or you've got some kind of ambient light.
Yes.
Which is what I was going to say. Because for the focus, if you're on your own, you're going to need the camera to be able to focus.
Yeah.
So you'll need, if you have one or two lights set up, that'll be a game changer as well. That's what we do for ours.
Yeah, I think like if you're really going to go to town on it, like a mean business, then I think you want two external lights shot in at 45 degrees.
Yeah.
So you want them set like 6 foot out from the camera, coming in like on a diagonal, so that you're getting some light up behind the fish, as not just on it. So if you're coming in at 45 from both angles, but I appreciate like it's a lot to have. You know, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you can get those lights though for like 20 quid.
Right.
So they're not. It's just put it on a bank stick, get the little converter.
Yeah.
And you're away, and it will help.
Yeah. So that to give you some advice, obviously, I don't want to dodge. I'm not trying to dodge the question, but you want two external lights, 45 degrees out, and my next thing would be to try and adjust the white balance, because they often come out very yellow, very gold, the night shot. So you definitely want to be cooling that white balance down. Just do it by eye. Do some test shots and make it look as natural as possible.
Yeah, cool. I'm just trying to find where I was on here. Pavel is going to Lac de Deux. Sorry, not Lac de Deux. Sorry. He's going on his first Lac de Orient expedition.
Is he? When?
I don't know.
Yeah.
He just says, what would be your advice?
Well, it really depends on the month, because it's constantly changing. You know, from May and June for sure, the fish not always in the trees, but I think that catching them in the forest is the most likely place to find fish and catch them. You know, I think fishing in open water in May and June is literally pissing in the wind. It really, really is. I think from July, August and September, once the fish can't quite get in July, well, I've just been in July, they could get into the trees. The water was really high at this moment. But once you get into August, generally they can't get into the forest. And from that moment on, you're fishing in the deeper water, you know, in the clear spots, beyond the weed, often at very long range. The only thing I will say is there is a new guard on there in recent times, and in years gone by, it's been, if you're fishing in a reserve, in somewhere where you shouldn't, you're going to have trouble. You know, guards are going to come and you're going to get fined. But previously, you used to be able to fish anywhere on the lake and not really have any bother from anyone. You could just fish as long as you weren't in the reserves or the out of bounds. You could fish anywhere. Whereas now, if you're not fishing in a night section, a designated night area, and the guard it won't be the guard that sees you, but you'll basically, the pike anglers will call the chairman, whoever, like the fisheries chairman, and he then calls the guard with a GPS pin of where you've been seen, and the guard will just check at dinner time or whatever, like last light, with his binoculars to see if you're still there, and then he will come for you either 11 o'clock at night or the early hours in the morning. And at the moment it's a 2-year ban and a 400 or 500 euro fine. I can't remember exactly which, and that's whether you're caught in a reserve or not fishing in a night sector. So if you're going to fish in the non-night zones, you're going to have to be very, very discreet, and you are risking a little bit of trouble. If you want a bit peaceful fishing, then yeah, stay in the night zones. I think there's 10 of them around the lake. Certain ones are open at certain times of year, but you have to look at the rules. But yeah, another top tip that I could give you for it is there's a huge population of not only tench but catfish. If you fish boilies of any description, you will catch a lot of tench. Almost guaranteed. Doesn't matter how big your boilies are. If you fish boilies, you will catch a lot of tench wherever you fish on the lake. And if you fish meal boilies, you will catch a lot of catfish wherever you are on the lake. So I quite often start with straight tigers. Big ones as well, the biggest tigers you can. And I'll only start introducing boilies when I start catching carp, because I do think you catch bigger carp on boilies as a general rule. So I would fish straight tigers, big ones, to start with. And if you start catching carp, then perhaps start introducing some boilies, but not fishy ones, because quite often you can catch cats and carp. You don't tend to catch tench and carp together. You don't tend to. But the catfish, if you fish fishy boilies, the catfish will come. It will come.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Lots of people getting out fishing.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
good.
It's good. So Callum Heathman won a fishing session with you in the latest giveaway. So we're going to look at a calendar. So Callum, I'll get in touch with you and we'll sort that out. Hopefully this week, once we work out a few dates, we'll send them over.
Yeah.
So let's do these next ones quite quick, because we've been going quite
This is available to come on that Swan Valley trip.
It could be, yeah.
It could be an option.
Yeah, that's not a bad shout.
Yeah.
We'll see. Right, so we've got a few more questions. We'll try and do them a little bit quickly just because of the time.
Yeah.
So we've got Lee. Okay, Lee's got one about bait boat. So dropping a rig from a bait boat at the marker float, should I drop it with a slack line?
Sorry, marker float?
Yeah, so if he's got his marker float.
In the boat?
When using a bait boat and dropping a rig at my marker float, so he's always got
at the marker float, yeah.
Should I drop it with a slack line? My thinking is, if I keep the line tight to feel the lead down, I'm going to get a swing back.
Yeah, this is a real common one.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, you're going to feel the lead down. And the way to do that when fishing to a marker float like that, obviously depending on the depth, you want to take the bait boat out so it's fractionally past your bait boat, past your marker float. But you don't want to drop it on a tight line, because if it's tight, it will literally fire out the hopper door and start coming back towards you, because there's zero play in the line. Depending on the depth, you want an element of droop or slack in your line, and what you want, you're obviously going to have to work it out based on the depth. So in an ideal world, the line's slack when you drop it, it suddenly shoots tight as it catches up on itself, and then it instantly goes boom and you feel it down. So you need to work out how much slack you need in that depth. To be honest, if the spot is really clear and you're confident, I don't think you need to feel it down. In recent times, on a lot of sessions, as when I was at Bayswater recently, I wasn't feeling it down. You don't want to drive past your spot and have loads of slack out there, but I was literally driving out onto a clip. The boat goes really tight against the clip, and I would let it sort of fall back until I take it out of the clip. I let the boat creep back towards me until the line was no longer tight. And the second that it was no longer bowstring tight, I would let go with my finger and open the hopper door, and you'd see the line shooting forward as it fell. Now, there's a degree of water tension and a degree of tension as it coming off the spool, and I think that's enough to keep the hook bait away from the lead. But what I know it ensures is that the bait and the rig land as one, and I really... The thing that the bait boat gives you the biggest edge with is you are dropping a pile that is almost impossible to recreate casting and spomming. It's a real tight concentration. So if you're confident that your spot is crystal clear, I don't think you go far wrong just dropping it just fractionally past the float, just free falling. But if you are sort of super obsessed and you really want to feel the drop, then you really need to get used to how much slack it needs before it shoots tight at the last minute and knocks down.
Cool. Got one about swans. So Craig has asked, at my local lake, the swans are a massive pain in the neck at this time of year. What's the best way? Yeah, what's the best way to keep them away from your swim?
Well, they're very, very, very determined birds. Yeah. So it's fishing in really shallow water and they're picking him up, or is it just like?
It just says they're a massive pain in the neck.
Yeah, well, you got two problems three problems that you can have with swan. One is that they can reach your bait, and in that situation, you're better off baiting up after dark. When I fish at Northey Park, for example, very, very shallow, and any form of bait in the day was just suicide. So I used to fish single tigers during the day, and if I wanted to put some bait out, I put it out after dark. Another thing that they can be a pain for is when you start spomming, they just come over to the spom and start eating it out of the spom. And in that situation, you just got to stop. You just stop. Or quite often you can feed them off somewhere else. If you've got some like old bait or some bread or what, if you can distract them with that while you feed out, I quite often throw a load of bait in the edge, like up. I purposely show them what I'm doing, get them there, and then run off and go and do it. And the other thing that swans can be a real menace for is in the autumn fighting and coming through your rods. And the only way you can get around that is having your tips buried. So if you see them chasing each other about and fighting, a lot of them, which you will see come the autumn, this is when they're starting to get dominant, trying to take over that lake. And you've got the young that are leaving their parents at that time, so you get a lot of fighting going into the autumn. So tips down at night.
Yeah. Matt's asked, how long would you leave your rod on a spot when you think you should be catching?
Well, that's it. I won't leave it on there if I thought I should have caught. That is the determining thing. You know, it's if you put a rod on a spot. Generally, you're working on a relatively difficult venue in 24-hour cycles. You cast out once, you bait up, etc. But reading the situation is one of the biggest things. So, for example, I was fishing at Bayswater once in the winter. I spent a whole day plumbing, casting out, bombing it up. Didn't catch the first night, and then the next day the wind's blowing an absolute hoolie. Right, I knew I couldn't recast better than I already had in those conditions. Loads of people are turning up and casting around, so I thought the best course of action is to leave be. You know, I put them out there as good as I can, left them in position, and ended up catching really well. So that's one thing, you know, deciding to leave them in because you know you can't do it better. Secondly, is the opposite of that, is in you put them out, but you haven't done it as good as you probably could, and you're seeing fish over your rigs, and you think you should have caught. In that situation, if the conditions have changed and you know you can do it better and there's fish around, get it back out there, do it, and so you're 100% happy with it, because you can't sit behind a rod that you're not convinced is presented. So you're trying to read the situation. If the fish are in your swim and you can see they're near your rig and they're feeding and you haven't caught for a prolonged period of time, there's a chance something's wrong. A tangled rig, a badly presented rig that's landed badly. You know, fish could have moved your hook bait and like it could be tangled under your main line or something. So if you think you should have caught, then you should make a change and do it to the best of your ability.
Got two more questions. How would you approach fishing a weedy park lake with roughly 30 carp in and only the odd couple of clear spots in it?
Well, obviously, if there's only a couple of clear spots and everyone's fishing them, then the fish can be scared of those if they're not doing bites. Goes back to the thing, you know, spots can become scary. If it's the type of weed that you can fish on top of, then I would look to do that. You know, a lot of people are scared of weed. But if you can get a drop in weed and you fish with a helicopter rig, with a pop-up, with a bead up, and you believe that that's visible, that's all you're trying to do, is make sure that your bait is accessible to a carp when you're fishing in weed as opposed to on a clear spot. You know, there was like years ago, I used to read those magazine articles where people say, if it's weedy, just chuck a solid bag out. But you can't chuck a solid bag into a 10-foot bed of Canadian pondweed right in the middle of it and expect a fish to dig it out, because the chances are they're not going to. So, yeah, different types of weed. Some weed, like blanket weed, low-lying weed, not stemmy weed. Weed that's stemmy, you can't generally fish on top of that because it's really ugly presentation. But if it's like a duvet sort of style weed, and you can fish on top of that. So chods over blanket, sort of low lying weed can be really, really good, especially onion weed and stuff like that, or stiff hinge rigs with the bead up the leg core, etc. But yeah, you don't want to be just chucking solid bags into really high weed like that. Solid bags into stemmy weed can be really good because it sort of finds its way to the bottom and the fish can get to it really easily. But different types of weed require different types of presentation, and ultimately it's all about, can the fish get access to your bait? And the easier the fish has access to your bait, the more likely they are to take it.
Cool. Right, last one is from Daniel, all about braided main lines. So I've just respooled my reels to sinking braid. Would you fish straight through to lead core? Was thinking about attaching a long fluoro leader as the braid's not that camouflage and quite buoyant.
Sorry, say again.
I've just respooled my reels to sinking braid. Would you fish this straight through to lead core? I was thinking about attaching a long fluoro leader as the braid's not that camouflage and quite buoyant.
Quite buoyant?
Yeah.
Did he say sinking braid? And then he said it's quite buoyant.
Yeah. So he said was thinking about attaching a long fluoro leader as the braid's not that camouflage and quite buoyant. So
right. Well, the main thing to consider, the first thing to consider, is the knot strength. I don't think you should ever fish braid straight through, because it's not fine braid anyway, because it can really cut into the fish. And I don't really recommend just using it on tubing. I would say you're going to fish it on either lead core or a fluorocarbon leader. And the next most important thing, whether it's a short leader or a long leader, the most important thing at that point is how good is your connection. Now, I use that called a sub braid, sinking braid, a lot. And personally, I find it really difficult to tie directly to a lead core leader. I find when I tie a grinner knot, it just pops in my fingers all the time. And it's not because the braid's not strong, because it's really strong, but the knot cuts into itself. And I tend to fish with a little 15 centimetre piece of 50 pound sinking armour cord, because the 50 pound sinking armour cord is absolutely bomb proof. It ties to the lead core or the fluorocarbon really, really neatly, really, really strongly, and then that 50 pound armour cord, sinking armour cord, knots really nice with a back-to-back grinner on the sub braid. So really check your knots on your leaders, and if you're struggling to get your knots to hold, a little 15 centimetre piece of that sinking armour cord, it just likes being knotted in either direction to either the main line or the lead core or the fluorocarbon. So I would say, if you really, you want, most of the time you want to be fishing with sinking braid, because if you've got floating braid, it will stay on the surface. Stuff will gather that's floating on the surface, whether it's weed, debris, leaves, all of that. It will gather on your line, and it will be eventually it'll be dragging you out of position. You can use a back lead to pin floating braid down or buoyant braid down, and again have your rod tips down to keep it below the surface. But generally, sinking braid is more of a general purpose and what most people would use.
Cool. Right, that pretty much wraps it up. A little bit of housekeeping to do. So we've got, next week, we've got Moz's vlog, which is on the Island Lake. Catches some nice fish.
Yeah,
and
nice.
Then the week after, so the 11th of August, I've penciled in another CarpFix live. Hopefully you're around.
Whether you check what's my schedule?
I think you're around. Because then it's the week after we've got Swan Valley. And then we have some more films after that. We've got Rob is on Tar Farm, and then we've got a Jacob vlog, and then we've got our new angler on the start of September. The 1st of September, we've got our new...
Is it top secret?
No, you can announce it.
Yeah, so obviously some of you will probably have seen that Tom Maker started up his own subscription-based thing. I don't think it's gone live yet. I don't think it goes live until the 1st of September. And we wish him very well with that. Obviously, we're really happy that what he did for us. It was really good to work with him. Brilliant angler. But obviously, that left a little hole in our team as such. So we're on the lookout for someone new. And we're going to be working with Tom Stokes for look, we did about, what was it, 6 films a year with Tom Maker.
Yeah.
So we're going to be working with Tom Stokes for the same amount. We've not taken him from Sipography. He's still going to be working with them. He's still going to be working with Corda and us. So he's a brilliant addition. You know, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, he's the best and the nicest angler to appear on the scene since Terry Hearn, and I include myself in that. An extremely accomplished angler, a really nice bloke, and yeah, really good addition to the team. He done pretty well in his first session, didn't he?
Yeah, first fish, 39 was it?
Yeah,
38?
yeah, 39, 38.
Yeah. So we had a good session. He must have caught nearly 10 fish or something. I was only there for the start of the session, but yeah, to see that first fish, just he caught it in an area of the lake that he'll say on the film that doesn't regularly produce fish on the spot that he did fish, just in amongst some weed. And yeah, 39 big fat. Looked like one of the aquarium fish. If anyone's watched that, it looked like one of those style, like one of those kind of fish. But yeah, that'll be out on the 1st of September. I think that falls on a Friday. Yeah. Yeah, so 1st of September, Tom Stokes' first film will come out. And then, yeah, we've got, after that, when we've got the lot films, we've got loads in the pipeline, loads to edit. We're going out twice in August. You're going to a lake in Belgium. I'm going over with Rob Burgess to France. And then we've got other films in amongst that.
We've got what's that one? Swan Valley.
Swan Valley.
We're going to. We're going to that Danny's new embryo lake in Belgium.
Yeah.
You're going with Rob to
Carpson's Lake, so
CarpFix.
Yeah.
Loads to look forward to. We've already got loads in the can, but also there's loads more filming. I've pretty much had the summer off, haven't I?
Yeah.
So I've had June and July. I thought I was going to go touring and catch loads. Didn't really. Yeah. But yeah, now it's back to work, Darrell. Back to work.
And then one last thing, some of you will have seen that we do an offer at the moment for any annual members. It also applies for existing members. So if you're an existing member, which you probably are watching this, go to CarpFix.shop. You'll see on there at the top there's summer deal. Click on there. You can convert from a monthly member to an annual member, which will save you money anyway. But we've basically got 150 quid's worth of stuff for 70 quid, which includes your 12 months access. So you get a free CarpFix mug, 2 pots of mainline pop-ups, a Corda waterproof cap, some Captor choddy hooks, a CarpFix sticker pack, and an air freshener for 70 quid.
Pretty good deal, that.
Yeah, so CarpFix.shop, you'll see it on there. If you are a new member, if you're watching this on YouTube later, just go and join via CarpFix.tv. It's as easy as that, really. Cool. That's us signing out until the 11th, hopefully, if you can make that one.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks good. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining us on our CarpFix Live, and hopefully see you on the next one on the 11th of August.